Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Visual Studio Toolbox Extensibility Edition. This is yet another part of a mini-series that we've been doing on the brand new VisualStudio.Extensibility model that is supposed to make your extensions easier to write and way more reliable. So far we've talked about what this model even is, what are the benefits of using it. We also talked about what even is an extension in Visual Studio, and then we started doing a deep dive with members of the Visual Studio team into different API pieces that you can implement for your extensions, including commands and user prompts and notifications. And now we're going to be talking about how you can add remote UI and tool windows to your extensions. So joining me to talk about that is Matteo. Hey, Matteo.
Hi, Leslie. Hi, everybody. I'm Matteo Prosperi. I'm a software engineer on the Visual Studio Extensibility team. I've been here for a couple of years, and I'm excited to show you how to build a tool window with the new Visual Studio.Extensibility APIs.
Awesome. So before we get started, what does it mean when we say remote UI and tool windows? What does that all entail?
So in traditional Visual Studio extensions, you simply use WPF because that's what Visual Studio is built with. In Visual Studio.Extensibility extensions, you cannot really do that because extensions normally run out of process. So they cannot share WPF object.NET objects with Visual Studio. So Remote UI is a technology that we have built that leverages WPF, and it's very similar to WPF, but allows sharing UI pieces across process.
Cool. So shall we dive on in and check out how to make that happen?
Yeah, sure. So today I will be creating a tool window. And because I don't want to bore everybody with just creating a bunch of WPF stuff, I will start with an existing application. So this is a simple WPF application that allows me to look for a NuGet package on NuGet.org and shows all the dependencies. So
is WPF the way that you'll need to go in order to use Remote UI properly?
Yes, Remote UI is built on top of WPF. What I frequently do when I write a Remote UI piece, I actually write it as a standalone application first, and then I convert it to Remote UI, just because, Remote UI is kind of green, and the tooling for traditional WPF is better.
Awesome.
So this is the application that I will convert. So now I will simply go into Visual Studio, and I will create a new Visual Studio Extensibility project. Here we go.
All right.
And let's call it NuGet.org Explorer. And we get the default project that will contain just one command. Mm-hmm. And next, because I wanted to share a bunch of code from the old application, I will just copy it in. To make things simpler, I will just add the existing project so that I have both of them in the same window, and they can just drag and drop stuff.
Cool. So there's nothing else particularly special about the WPF app that you're doing here?
No, not really. This is traditional WPF, and it's going to, so it contains a normal MVVM style WPF XAML, and since this is MVVM, the code behind is completely empty. Something else that we don't do to make it compatible with Remote UI, we don't use events, and we don't use type names from disassembly within the XAML, because the XAML for Remote UI will actually be loaded in a separate process. It doesn't have access to those types.
Gotcha.
So first of all, I will modify the command for from the sample extension to open the new tool window that I'm about to create. So let's start with giving it a reasonable name.
Check out the command video earlier in the playlist if you haven't already.
Here we go. And let's rename the file as well. Then let's give it a good name. This is the name that will show up in the menu. And Visual Studio actually has a nice built-in NuGet icon, so we will get there. And since this is a view, we will actually move it under the View Other Windows menu. So that's all taken care of.
Sweet. So what does that refer to, the View Other Windows? Is that under like the Windows tab?
Yeah, this is going to be under View and Other Windows, so it's going to end up in there. So now that that's done, we have to take care of a couple of things in the CSproj file. So first of all, we are going to use WPF. So to make everything work fine, we will use WPF and say that this is going to be true. And then we will add a package reference to the NuGet protocol package, so that, and that's it. So this is all for now in the CSproj. Next, we can actually create the tool window class. So
this is where the not magic happens.
This is where the non-magic happens. Actually, very little happens in this class. So we will call it NuGet tool window, and we will also capitalize NuGet correctly. Here we go. Oh, I kind of like the new namespace style. And here we go.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That was so fast.
Yeah, I just copied this from our samples on NuGet.org. The only thing that's actually different is, well, there's the proper title for the window, and we have to fix all the usings. So we go and do that. This will bring in a couple of usings. The NuGet controller is the next part, so we will be creating it in a moment. And the actual constructor does participate in dependency injection, so we can just put all the different components that we need in there. In this case, Visual Studio Extensibility is used more or less everywhere across extensions. Mm-hmm. So this is it for the tool window. As you can see, there's really not much except for creating this remote user control, which is the next part. So let's create a new class for it. So let's call it a NuGet control, and we'll do the same.
So all the sample code is available on the VS Extensibility repo?
It is.
Good stuff.
Yeah. So again, I'm saving a little bit of time with my snippets, but there's very little code here. We are just creating remote user control. We are extending this class. And as data context, we will use the same exact view model that we use in the traditional WPF app. And because this view model is disposable, well, we are also disposing of it. And that's it. After that, we need to create some XAML, because this is a remote UI control, so it will be translated inside of the Visual Studio process into a traditional WPF control. So let's go there. Doesn't really matter because we will replace the all content. And we will actually call this with the same name as the control, and our system will take care of tying them together. Don't really care about that, and should have a snippet for that as well. here we go. So this is a traditional data template. Nothing special about it. The one thing that is a bit particular is we have this VS namespace, and this is going to tell our build system that this uses remote UI capabilities.
Is that a new namespace?
This is a new namespace, yes. So that's taken care of. Next step is we set this as an embedded resource because this will not be compiled inside the project. And then we copy the view model folder inside our project. And so this view model folder contains a WPF view model. There are very few things that are different in a remote UI view model compared to a WPF view model. One of them is we don't use commands. We use an asynchronous version that makes it easier to build up your extension to be fully asynchronous from top to bottom.
Awesome.
So we actually don't need this command class, which was just an implementation of the component model I command. So we're just taking that away and replacing the command with an async command. Which also take a cancellation token, that we don't care about because this is going to be a synchronous implementation. This is almost all the changes that we need to make for this to work. We actually need to mark this as data contract.
So what does this attribute do exactly?
So because the way remote UI works is that the XAML will be sent by the extension to Visual Studio, and in Visual Studio it's used to create a WPF control. And the data context or view model will actually be copied over to Visual Studio, and then the remote UI infrastructure takes care of synchronizing it. So whenever the extension changes something, it will be replicated in Visual Studio. If the UI changes something, it will be replicated in the extension. All of that is taken care for you, but we want you to go and mark the classes as data contract and all the property as data members, just to make it more clear what do you want to have replicated between different processes.
That makes sense.
Oops. So everything that's a public property, I will just mark it as a data member.
Do users get like a warning before compiling saying like, hey, you might want to label some of these as data members if you haven't already?
Actually, not, but that's a very good idea.
Sweet.
And here we go, and hopefully I got them all. So that takes care of adapting the data model. And the next step is I will go into the XAML for the main window, and I will just copy the entirety of the XAML, except the window part. So all the content will go as is inside our data template. And after this, I don't really need the WPF up anymore, so I will just remove it. And this thing should build.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, it did.
Yay, all right.
So we are almost there. So this thing will already work as is inside the Visual Studio, but we also want to make it look like Visual Studio, and more importantly, we want it to look nice when we use a dark theme.
Yeah, that's important.
So we will go in here, and I have another little snippet. Here we go. So I brought in a couple of styles of namespaces from the Visual Studio shell assembly, and a few colors and styles for the different WPF controls that I use, like buttons and combo boxes.
Awesome. Where'd you get those?
So these are the same that you would use in a VS SDK project. And as you can see, there are some, well, we're supposed to get some errors. I think Visual Studio hasn't caught up yet, because this project cannot really see these types, since those will be available in the Visual Studio process and not in the extension. But we are actually working on improving the XAML editing experience for remote UI extensions so that you get full IntelliSense for this use case as well.
Cool. So for these particular namespaces, to make sure that it's cohesive with the rest of the UI, is it listed anywhere on like our repository, or can we?
Yes.
Like if you're not familiar with the VS SDK project and you're just writing.
Yeah, these are included in the samples and our docs on the GitHub repo.
Awesome.
For remote UI.
All right, so we're good to go, right? Like, is it safe to build?
Yeah, just one last thing. We need to go back to the command and actually tell that when the command runs, it's supposed to show the tool window. So. And that's it, the very last line of code.
Awesome. So without that line, there'd be no tool window if you clicked on the command.
Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah.
You just get disappointment.
Yeah. So now we can go and actually see it running inside of runs in VS. So we have to go to View, Other Windows. We get our NuGet Explorer with this nice NuGet icon.
Looks very legit.
Yep. It's a long name to type. And here it is.
Looks good. Shoot, yeah, only difference is that it's in Dirt mode. That's awesome.
Yep.
Sweet, I really like that. It seems like a lot more streamlined of an experience when it comes to setting up those tool windows. And yeah, I'm excited to see how people can extend it even further. Like, are there any limitations to this current experience that exists?
Yeah, there are some. In particular, the fact that you have to work within an MVVM framework, since everything needs to be done through data binding. And you cannot contribute to your own controls, so at least not yet.
Cool. Stay tuned for that. It will happen soon. Awesome. So anything else about remote UI? That was pretty straightforward. Yeah,
that's about it. And you are going to be able to leverage it for all your other UI needs across the VisualStudio.Extensibility APIs that goes beyond the tool windows.
I know when we talk about writing UI, it can be a little intimidating, or just at the very least kind of frustrating sometimes. So it's nice to know that that has been streamlined a bit to be a little less cumbersome.
Yeah, and we try to keep it as close as possible to a normal WPF experience.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Matteo. And
thank you.
Yeah, awesome. So join us next time where we actually wrap up this series, at least for now. We'll be back with Bertan and Tina from earlier, where we talk about what the future of VisualStudio.Extensibility holds. So until then, happy coding.